When Goldratt wrote about things, he didn't really care if he was dealing with a problem in manufacturing or a problem in banking or a problem in a married couple that couldn't get along. Every problem was the same problem because the universe only has a couple of rules. How did we use TOC? We used it to build our business. We used it to handle problems we had with our employees. We used it to handle problems we had with insurance companies and conflicts we had with insurance companies. And really, I think most innovatively, we used it in diagnosis and treatment. We used it to bring patients incredibly insolvable number of problems down to an exceedingly simple model that anyone could learn to operationalize and helped people get better faster. Now, a system, if you think about it, a system is any number of separate parts acting in sequence toward a goal. And this is probably why Goldratt called the first novel, The Goal. The goal is incredibly important. If you don't know the goal, you're not going to be able to use this technique. Now, every one of us, when we start to treat a patient, we have a goal. It might be to get this patient into recovery. It might be something smaller, like to keep this patient out of jail. But whatever it is, there is a goal. And there's going to be a goal that we and the patient share in common. And that's going to be important later when we talk about a particular tool in TOC. But we all know examples of these systems. One that has nothing to do with addiction is you can't put the body on a car before you finish the chassis, but one that does have to do with addiction is you can't release dopamine from the ventral tegmental area before you make it. Right? But we really don't commonly think about the neurobiology in that sequential series way. And we start talking to people as soon as they come to treatment. We start talking about the wonderful world of recovery and the wonderful life they'll have in AA. And most of the patients who we get on the first day don't even want to recognize they have a problem. And you can't talk someone into going to AA before they recognize they have a problem. And we'll talk about what Goldratt did was, before, not that we weren't using the term resistance in psychiatry, but I'll show you what he had as a much more physicist's view of levels of resistance, which actually, and I had a very intensive analytic psychiatric training. So resistance was a huge topic of discussion and training in my residency. And Goldratt's view of resistance puts to shame, really, anything I learned in analytic theory. But really, we don't like to think in systems. If you went back to my psychiatric residency, you wouldn't hear about systems. If you tried to talk about systems to the faculty, they would have revolted, because it was a very analytic, very therapeutic system, and people did not want to think about patients getting better in sequential order. They wanted to think about patients getting better in a sort of a holistic parallel process where things just happened. And we all could make our theories about why did that patient get better, but we really just wanted to see it as an organic representation of the process. And we see in our field, many people see any idea about systems or sequence to be overly reductionistic and industrial, takes the soul out of treatment. But we don't solve any problems in life or anywhere else in healthcare without sequence. And here's an example. When I started, not when I started, even later than when I started medical school, about 15 years ago, the death rate from anybody getting general anesthesia for any reason was 1 in 10,000. The anesthesiologists got together, followed a sequential iterative pattern, and instituted sequential algorithms, and within 10 years took that death rate from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in a million. That's an improvement of 10,000 times. Could you imagine if we improved addiction treatment efficacy by 10,000 times in 10 years? A couple of principles to understanding TOC is that all systems have a constraint that is more limiting than all the others. This is really kind of like thinking a chain has a weakest link. We all agree with that. It's intuitive, and that this is nothing different than that. And that weakest link, or tightest constraint, is going to limit the output of the entire system. Whatever the most limiting constraint is what's going to determine what comes out of that system. Nothing else, no other part of the system is going to do that, just the most limiting constraint. And that means the only way to improve the output of the system is to work on that limiting constraint, and nowhere else. That's not actually how we do things, though. So, we said each chain has a weakest link, but consider a pipe. A 1-inch pipe that has a nick in it that goes down to 3/4 of an inch and then goes back to an inch. If we tried to put an inch of water through that pipe, only 3/4 of an inch is going to come out. We could increase the pressure. We could try to force the water in. The water might come out faster, but if you put 10 gallons per minute in, you're not going to get 10 gallons per minute out. If you try to fix something else besides that most limiting constraint, it's not going to actually increase the output of the pipe. We can't improve this system except by improving the single most limiting constraint. So that's the biggest problem in this moment, is that constraint. And it's not what most people do. Most people try to fix the whole chain or the whole pipe or the whole system right at once. We'll say, you go fix the front end of the pipe. You fix that kink in the middle. You enlarge that the output of the pipe. And everybody's doing something. And what that means is that a lot of the energy of our system and our workforce is working on things that aren't going to achieve the goal. So if our goal was more water through the pipe, there's only one place we could work to get more water through the pipe. And if anything else we do is a waste. In addition to it being a waste, it also turns out that anything else we do, because of feedback loops, actually makes things worse. And when we start talking about patients, I think you'll probably see that. And when we split things up and tell part of an organization to work on the front end and part of the organization to work on the middle and part of the organization to work on the back end, each of those parts starts to say that that's their job. And then instead of the goal being the output of the pipe, the goal is fixing the front end. So there's some people in our organization who are focused, instead of on the goal of the organization, which is more water through the pipe, they're focused on fixing their front end, which is a local optimum. And they start judging themselves by that local optimum. And this is part of what ruins the whole organization. The whole organization goes downhill because by focusing on their local optimum, they actually start making progress. And they start pushing things actually faster where you can't go faster, builds up inventory or pressure or inefficiency, and things work even worse at the constraint. And when you do that, the constraints actually get worse instead of better. So TOC only has 3 questions. Because TOC is really a process of change. And when we think about addiction treatment, it's a process of change. Now, Goldratt said there were only 3 questions that were important. First, what to change. Second, what to change to. And third, how to change. And like everything else he talked about, these are in invariable sequential order. You cannot talk about how to change until you've decided What are you going to change to? And you can't talk about what are you going to change to until you've decided what are you going to change. Here's how he layered the resistance to change. And if you notice the color coding, they're color-coded to those three things. So the first level of resistance is the zero level. What problem? So I come to you and I say, you really need to stop drinking. This is causing a lot of problems. Everyone's complaining. And you say, what problem? It's way too early to be talking to you about the solution of stopping drinking. You're not even aware there's a problem. Once you know there is a problem, then you may disagree with my definition of the problem. I think the problem you have is you're drinking and you think it's your wife or your boss. After that, there's nothing I can do about that problem. Okay, maybe my drinking's the problem, but I work for a liquor company, and if I don't drink, I can't work. If I can't work, I'll starve and die in the gutter, and can't have that, so there's nothing I can do about that. Or let's say you finally agree that I've got the problem right, and that is what you want to change. But you're not agreeing with what I think you ought to change to. And the first level of that is, that's not the right plan. Right? So I'm saying, your drinking is a problem. My advice to you is to enter treatment for addiction, and you say, no, I got a different plan. I agree with the problem, but that's not the plan. The real plan is I'm going to get a gym membership and stop eating meat, and that will solve my problem. Or, okay, I like your plan, except you don't have the details right, which is just more argument about that. Or bringing up that, okay, your plan might work, but here are all the negative effects. And once we agree on what to change to, for instance, a non-drinking person, then we have disagreement on how we're going to get there. Okay, but we can't do that. I can't go to treatment because I have this requirement, this is in the way, I don't have any money, I can't leave my wife at home, my job won't let me, all kinds of things. And some of those are real, and some of those might not be real. Or, okay, I understand how we're going to do that, but we can't do it exactly that way. Okay, I don't want to go to IOP for 8 weeks. I only want to go to IOP for 4 weeks. We can't do the whole thing. Or, sort of echoing the number 5, it's okay, but there are risks you're not taking into account. Bad things are going to happen to me if I do this your way. Number 9 is a unique situation, and we in this field have to make sure we don't, when we look at taking care of patients specifically, we have to make sure we don't default to number 9. Number 9 is that sort of, I'm not in the same universe with you. I don't actually have the same goal. So when people really don't have the same goal, it goes to number 9. And so many people in our field do default to that. Like, I want him to have a sober, happy, joyous, and free life, and he just wants to drink. Well, if he really just wanted to drink, he'd have never walked in to our treatment center. He'd have never come for an assessment. He'd have never picked up the phone. There's obviously ambivalence there, or we'd have never heard from him. And we need to make sure we don't blame the patient, and instead look at the ambivalence and help remove the barriers. So we can see resistance to change as a constraint. We can't suggest to somebody how they can change before we agree what to change to, and we can't agree on what to change to until we agree on what to change. If we just did that one thing in our treatment centers, our treatment would become exponentially more effective. What we found was coming right out of school, counselors are taught, if you just, put a counselor in a group and say, go, treat those people, you're going to see lots and lots of wasted energy trying to fight or change things that people are not ready to change. So a lot of people are now using motivational interviewing, and this is a big help, but it can actually be even further automated in our assessment process if we took into account these levels of resistance.